it's so important that women in particular, but everyone across the board, uh, you need to advocate for yourself.
Yes.
No one else is going to advocate for you. You need to advocate for yourself and know that it is okay to question that doctor. If they don't give you the answer you feel in your gut, we all have that gut intuition. And if we feel our gut intuition is telling us that's not right, that doesn't sound right, there's got to be something else. Follow that intuition. Question that doctor. Every journey has a story, and every story has the power to heal. My story hasn't been ordinary. I was adopted. I'm a survivor of abuse and trauma, and I have more than a dozen siblings. That's just the beginning of my story. Life has taken me on a long and winding road of healing and personal growth, a journey that ultimately led me back to myself and the path I was meant to walk. Along the way, I discovered that stories have power, the power to connect us, to help us grow, and even to help us heal. This is Travel Time Stories with Shannon. Real journeys, real stories, and real healing. Welcome back to Travel Time Stories with Shannon, where real journeys meet real stories and healing happens one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Shannon, from the Lone Star State of Texas, and some weeks I fly solo and share my personal journey of travel adventures, healing, and personal growth. And other weeks, I'm joined by my best friend and co host, Anne from Missouri, as we sit down with special guests who share their insights, expertise, and personal stories to help all of us along our own journeys. Today, Anne is here with me. Hey, Anne.
Hey, everybody. Today we're joined by Brandi B. Doyle, nurse practitioner, combat veteran, trauma survivor, intuitive healer, and spiritual teacher.
After serving as a combat medic in Afghanistan and returning home to the collapse of her physical and mental health, Bee began a healing journey that bridges functional medicine, plant medicine, and soul work.
She speaks with fluency to both the medical and the mystical, and today we're diving into both.
Bee, thank you so much for your service and welcome to the show.
Thank you. My honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we're super excited for today's show to hear your story and
Yes.
learn more about you. And again, we appreciate your service for this country. We both come
Yes.
from military families, so we know what that means to serve. So we appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Well, sometimes I feel like the families are the ones that really serve the most. So thank you both also.
Our pleasure. And so you served as a combat medic in Afghanistan. That alone carries a lot of weight. And when you came home, you described your health physically and mentally collapsing. What did that season look like for you?
Yes, I mean, I came home from a tour of duty in Afghanistan, and my time in Afghanistan I wasn't just tucked away in a hospital somewhere. I had a very active tour. I came home with a combat action badge. My military folks understand what that means, but basically having took part in firsthand combat action. And when I came home, I really felt like there was a few things going on. I felt like at the ripe age of 25 years old that the most important work that I could ever do was already behind me. I really had this belief that nothing I could do in my life could ever be more important than saving soldiers on the front lines, right? So I was grappling with that and grappling with, these wounds of what I later found out was post-traumatic stress. I didn't know quite, the words right away, but the flashbacks and the nightmares and the hypervigilance and, still that underlying feeling of, well, what else? How do I live my life now that the most important thing I could ever do is behind me? And so,
Yeah.
like many people struggling with trauma, I was numbing out. I turned to alcohol, and it really became something very problematic for me. And I covered it well, I was still functioning and trying to check all the boxes, but nothing was really giving me any sort of fulfillment or that feeling of deep purpose in life. And so it was a very dark time. I ended up at one point in a psychiatric hospital just because I was struggling so deeply and doing all the things prescribed by the VA. I was taking the meds and doing the therapy and checking all the boxes, so to speak, but still just found myself in a very, very dark, dark place. And I think that's the best word to describe that season, was just a place of darkness.
Yeah.
PTSD shows up differently for everybody. And it was good that you realized that something bigger was happening, and that you couldn't just push through, and needed the help and got it. So kudos to you, girl.
Yeah, it was not an easy road. I
Yeah.
sort of met that crossroad at a certain point where, after I ended up in the psychiatric hospital, that it's like, I don't really have a choice anymore. I have got to figure my way through this. And it led down a rabbit hole of many different modalities and everything, because I was not really finding the sort of deep, purposeful healing in the traditional VA system, in the sort of like top down talk therapy. And what I didn't know then, but I understand now, is that I was not able to really benefit from those sort of treatments because I didn't have safety in my body. I was still walking around like this, shoulders in my
Mm-hmm.
ears and just hyper vigilant and not having the verbiage for that. But I knew, what I did know is that talking about it week after week after week was not helping. In fact, it was making things worse in my situation.
And I think that's true for a lot of people. I have a lot of personal experience with mental health and mental health and our mental health system here. And it is not, I'm sorry, but it is not a good system. The mental health care in the USA needs to be totally revamped and
Yes.
redone. And I hope that we can get to that point sometime, because they treat every person the same way and in the same manner using the DSMB book. And not every person responds the same, has the same, gosh, I can't find the right word for it now, but every person is different, and they may have the same diagnoses, but how it affects them, what they respond to and what helps them can be completely different. You
Yes.
can't put every person in one box. And that's what our mental health here tries to do. They put everybody with that same diagnosis in the same box and follow the same treatment plan.
That's
And you
if you
can't
can
do
get an
that.
appointment. I mean, that's if you
Yeah.
can even get in to see somebody. And I am not kidding you. It is not pretty out there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I could not agree more. And I mean, I've seen that from both sides, right? Being a nurse practitioner and actually working in that system. And, the other side of the table, right? Having sat through that as a patient as well. And yes, the
Hmm.
system is across the board, not just our mental health system, but healthcare in general. And
Yes, I would agree. Yeah.
Yes, I
it's all
agree.
based on, evidence-based protocols and different things like that. But also, what really fascinated me as I sort of dove deeper into my healing journey was, all these medications that I was prescribed. There is no medication really for PTSD per se. And so
Hmm.
here I was feeling even worse about myself, because it was like medication after medication is not helping, the SSRIs that I was being prescribed. And at a certain point, I felt like I was being looked at as like I was malingering, or, you're not getting better and you should, and sort of felt like I was being looked down upon. And come to find out, it's like, well, there's no real research that even says these medications are helpful for PTSD in the first place, right?
Exactly.
Hmm.
Kind of almost like a gaslighting by that whole system as well.
Yeah. And that's the
Mhm.
other thing with the medication. usually the medication don't treat the disease. They treat symptoms of the disease, but not the disease itself. And so really, like, you're not helping the the person with that disease. You're not helping them overcome that disease. You're just helping them deal with the symptoms that come from that disease.
Exactly.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's sort of, I hit a certain point where it was like, I don't want to take these medications that are not helping anyway. It's just more side effects and they're not really
Mhm.
working. So what am I doing here? And, it led on that path of, I don't want a band-aid solution anymore. Like I want to heal. And, I think there in the Western world, we get confused about healing and curing, right? We're so cure
Mhm.
mindset in the West, whether that's mental health or physical health. We just want things to be gone. But in terms of healing, it's like, no, I'm ready to really kind of unpack the layers and do that deep work to integrate. Because PTSD, is something I will live with, right? It's about
Mhm.
learning how to work within that, within my sort of window of tolerance, as I call it. But I'm not cured, right? But it's about healing. That healing journey is truly just that, right? It's a journey.
Yeah,
It is.
exactly. And
Mhm.
as a nurse practitioner, you're grounded in the evidence-based medicine. So how
Mhm.
did you begin blending that with the functional medicine and plant medicine?
Great question. A long, a long and winding journey indeed. As I mentioned, I just wasn't getting the relief that I really wanted. And along with my mental health, my physical health started to collapse. I ultimately ended up diagnosed with an autoimmune disease.
Oh
And
gosh.
I just had this inner knowing, this feeling that there has to be something more than, well, here's your medication. So what? I mean, diet, lifestyle, none of that was even discussed with the provider when I got my diagnosis. And so I knew enough to know that there has to be something more I can do for myself. And also kind of looking at it as well through this new lens of, oh my gosh, this provider didn't do anything wrong by the book, right? I'm doing air quotes
Mhm.
here, nothing wrong, but it left so much to be desired. So it really sent me on this, healing path of not just for me, but how can I be a better practitioner to actually give people deep relief? And really, I was sort of just coming into what I call like a spiritual awakening. And so
Mhm.
everything in that realm still felt very unfamiliar, even a little taboo. So I sort of, got my feet wet, so to speak, with the things that felt a little bit safer to me, like acupuncture, massage. But acupuncture in particular was incredibly helpful
Hmm.
and just sort of really opened me up to, okay, this is really working with like the energy systems in the body, the chi in the body. And so if
Mhm.
this works, if this is giving me relief, what else is possible? What else is out there? And so that led down another path of really deep exploration into looking at the body as, that energetic system that it really is, and that nothing in the body exists in isolation, right? We can't just look at the thyroid when we're talking about something like Hashimoto's autoimmune. It's a whole body system that really needs to be integrated and looked at. And of course, yes, we're taught that somewhat, but it's so true and it's so often overlooked in our medical system. It's like, who's really looking at the big picture here, right?
Mhm.
Everybody referred to different specialists and different things, but how can we really integrate and put it all together? And that's where the energetics, I think, comes in so beautifully as well.
So, how do you reconcile the clinical and the mystical?
Well, I definitely feel like these days I'm more in the mystical because I have just my eyes have been awakened to so many
Hmm.
things that cannot be explained by that black and white. This is evidence-based. This is, we can prove or disprove something. So I feel like I'm so much more drawn into the mystical, but the science is catching up to so much of this. And it's
Yes.
like, these things that used to seem out there, or even quote, I'm doing air quotes again, like woo woo or too far out there,
Mm-hmm.
like quantum physics and the energy field. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. Science is actually starting to catch up with so much of this. And even ancient practices like yoga, we knew that ancients did these practices, but now we're seeing why. We're starting to let the science catch up. And so that is, my jam, I'll call it, when we get that scientific evidence to back up some of these, more broad topics that for a long time we couldn't actually prove or disprove, but now we are. And so it's like, things are really starting to open up. And the way that we have such access to information these days, I think we're only going to see that, open up even further. It's like, what else? What else haven't we learned yet or haven't been able to really prove yet?
Right. I get so excited when I read an article where they're proving what people refer to a lot of times as old wives' tales. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but these are, and my mom was a big believer in healing. My grandmother, they never went to the doctor. My grandmother went out in the woods. She foraged the medication, prepped it, and gave it to the kids. And so my mom learned a lot from that. And she always swore by it. And so, yeah, when I read a science article that says, hey, this actually really works, that we had no idea, I get so happy. I'm like, oh, yes, thank you. Thank you for
Yeah.
backing that up. It's
Yeah,
real.
it is real. All the herbs and the plants and, everything from the earth. It's like our ancestors lived for, we survived this long without the involvement of big pharmaceutical companies and,
Mm-hmm.
man-made products. So why would we not think that we can go back to this ancient wisdom of the earth, right? And even the ancient wisdoms in our bodies, it's so deep, right? And yes, it's like, oh, when the science starts to catch up, we're like, yay!
Yeah, it's so
I told you
exciting.
so. I don't want to say I told you so, but I told you so.
Right?
Right. Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize like your body is built in a way to be self healing.
Yes.
Hmm.
That's the way it was designed. And you look at our ancestors, and they lived way longer than we did. And they didn't have none of the things that we have now. They didn't use the things that we use now and lived way longer, better to me, productive lives than what we have now.
Well,
More in
Absolutely.
balance and in tune
yeah,
with the earth and everything else than what we are today.
chemical free lives, we have to
Yeah.
say. Not in their food, not in their what they drank. I mean, everything was healthy and fresh, and that's the problem. They put so much junk in our food that it's just you have to question.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that. I love when people start to question because I think that's sort of the first, that was the one of the first steps for me. It was like this knowing that I don't even like the way this pharmaceutical drug smells. Why am I putting it in my
Hmm.
body? Really
Mhm.
starting to question what's going on here and what is actually making me sick? What is making my body attack itself? And how can we get it to stop? Because I don't want to rely on these pharmaceutical medications forever. And I want to feel good, right? I want to, I have big things to do in this world. So I want to feel good to be able to do it.
Right. So what does healing look like when you approach it from both the science and the spirit?
That's a beautiful question. It involves, I think, a lot of unlearning. We have to learn to really be open to what is possible. And again, I sort of spoke to that, healing versus curing and sort of approaching healing from that lens of, okay, maybe I will not be able to completely cure this autoimmune disease or this post traumatic stress or whatever it is, but I can heal by learning to integrate that learning to sort of look at the places that got me here in the first place. And for me, it was a long journey of, a big part of that was seeing the ancestral threads in my healing as well, or in my lineage, I should say, and realizing that purpose that I'm here to really heal the wounds that my ancestors never could. My grandfather was a POW in World War II, and it just sort of became very apparent to me. And, when we think about science versus spirit, it's like, well, yes, we have proven that in the science realm as well. We call it epigenetics, right? It's like we're coming in with, call it ancestral wounds, call it past life stuff, whatever you're comfortable with. But we now understand that we are here to, or coming in with imprints on our souls, on our woundings that are not even ours, right?
Right.
And so just being open, I think. And, I'm not anti Western medicine at all. I still will lean on Western medicine when I need. I think, we have been blessed with certain medications that can really, really help in situations. We have antibiotics that we can use, although often overused. I will say that.
Mm-hmm.
But, it can be a beautiful thing. But I encourage people to not lean on that entirely, right? Because there's so many other things down the holistic path, down the spiritual path. And for me, I can only speak, deeply to this for myself, but such a big part of that healing journey I came to realize was this deep, like, spiritual dissonance, I'll call it, being so disconnected from source, from spirit, from the earth even. And so that was a big part of it, was coming back to that, coming back to awakening that ancient wisdom within my body. And, that's not something that they're going to tell you when you go to the doctor's office. Like,
Mm-mm.
maybe you need to go connect with Mother Earth, right?
You're right.
But it was like I was so, in such desperation that these things just started opening up for me. And it was part of my journey. And I always encourage people to just be curious, question what else is possible, and I think the paradigm is starting to shift, right? Like, even for my parents' generation, it was like, whatever the doctor said is like biblical,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right. Yep.
And, know, that whole system has led to, like I mentioned, a lot of like medical gaslighting. And, especially
Mm-hmm.
as women, they
Yep.
chalk things up to, oh, it's just perimenopause or menopause, or no, it's like, no, you deserve to feel good at every age and stage of life. And if that's not happening for you, let's figure out what's really going on. And
Right.
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, the way the traditional medical system is set up, that's not going to happen in your 15-minute appointment with your general practitioner, right? So,
Exactly.
and
Yep.
it's about reclaiming that power too, and not giving your power away to that doctor, that provider, and reawakening that own inner healing intelligence. Because like you said, Shannon, given the right conditions, the body is designed to be a self-repairing, cleaning machine,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep. Exactly. And it's so important that women in particular, but everyone across the board, you need to advocate for yourself.
Yes.
No one else is going to advocate for you, not even that doctor. You need to advocate for yourself and know that it is okay to question that doctor. If they don't give you the answer you feel in your gut, we all have that gut intuition. And if we feel our gut intuition is telling us that's not right, that doesn't sound right, there's got to be something else. Follow that intuition, question that doctor. It's okay to do that. I know a lot of people, especially my generation and before me, you don't question the doctor. They're the educated ones. They know what they're talking about, but that is not true.
And
It
guys,
is
yeah.
absolutely okay.
And if you can't get anywhere with that doctor, there are plenty of others out there. Do your
Ex-
homework. Ask
Yep.
your network of people. Who have you seen? who really, helped you, and go from there. You don't have to stick with the same doctor. You don't. And B, you hit the nail on the head when you said your 15-minute appointment, because those doctors, especially the ones that work for hospitals and bigger groups, they literally designate 15 minutes for your appointment because they have to get so many people in and out because, revenue here, it's about money now. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've seen that from both sides, like I mentioned.
yes.
And, I don't work in that arena as a nurse practitioner anymore because of that reason. I
Mhm.
couldn't provide the sort of care and support that I really signed up to do. And, that's why I coach now. It's like I can actually really help people heal rather than you're in, you're out, here's your Band-Aid fix. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's a system that leaves so much to be desired. And, that was another thing that sort of led me towards functional medicine because I wanted deeper answers. And functional medicine really does sort of dig down to the root cause of many conditions. And initially, when I was diagnosed with my autoimmune, they didn't even know that it was autoimmune. I had to dive deeper with the functional medicine to really get a clear understanding. So, that's an option for people too who haven't had great success in the traditional Western medicine model.
Yeah. And just let me say here before I get a bunch of hate mail from physicians reaching out to me, I
Right.
love I love medical doctors. I work for medical doctors, so I have
Same.
nothing against medical doctors at all. And in fact, my family doctor I call him Super Doc because I think
Yes.
he's the best in the world. But he doesn't just do 15-minute appointments. I will tell you that. We are lucky that we have been with him for over 20 years, and he rejects the whole 15-minute appointment thing and really gets to know his patients. And he is open to both traditional medicine as well as functional medicine. He will offer alternatives, holistic things. I have nothing against doctors. I'm just saying people need to advocate for themselves because there
Yes.
are a lot of doctors out there that do not take the time, whether that's because they don't personally want to or because they work for an organization that does not allow them to take more than 15 minutes with each patient. So you have to advocate for yourself. It's very
Yeah.
important.
Yes. And thank you
Yes.
for mentioning that. I don't want to, come across as I'm sort of saying anything bad about that profession or medical providers in general.
Yeah,
They're working in the constraints of this system, right? It's a
Right.
system-wide
exactly.
failure.
It's the system. Yeah, that's what
Mhm.
I have issues with. It's our system. Our
Yes.
system needs to be changed. Yeah. And I feel
Absolutely.
bad for the doctors and nurses that have to work within the constraints of that system because I know many of them that agree that the system is broken and needs to be fixed, but they don't have the power to change it. Neither do I, you know, but
That's right.
hopefully somebody out there listening will will do something about it.
Well, I think that's why these conversations are so important, right? It's like,
Mhm.
well, if we're not even talking about it, then we can't expect anything to change. And this is where the change happens, is from conversations and getting people to start to wake up to this a little bit, right? Wake up to this sort of system-wide failure and the fact that there are people out there suffering, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Definitely. Mm.
And so
Yeah.
B, when people hear plant medicine, they don't always understand what that truly means. Can you kind of tell the audience what actually is plant medicine?
Yes, when I speak about plant medicine, I am talking about plants that we are using intentionally, ceremonially for a specific purpose. And my healing journey did involve the integration of psychedelic plant medicines,
Mhm.
including like psilocybin mushrooms and even ayahuasca, which is a vine from the jungle. But I was called into that work when I reached a certain point at in my healing journey. It wasn't at the very beginning, this is after I had established some safety in the body and I had, done a fair amount of peeling back the layers, if you will. But I really felt a pull to explore myself more deeply. And what these sort of plant medicines can offer is getting out of what we call an ordinary state of consciousness, right? And
Mm-hmm.
putting us into a non-ordinary state where often what we see is our subconscious being revealed to us. And so I've also worked with ketamine, which of course is not a plant medicine, but same sort of thing, right? Getting into that non-ordinary state of consciousness. And as a nurse practitioner, that's some of the work I do now in terms of traditionally, I do work at a ketamine clinic and have really seen these sort of medicines, I should say, open things up for people where, maybe there's been this recurring pattern or problem and they haven't quite been able to get to the root of it. And after a ketamine journey or a plant medicine journey, things are revealed, right? And the medicine is just a catalyst. It's about how you make the meaning and how you actually integrate and sort of incorporate that into your life, right? So it's done very intentionally, very, set and setting are incredibly important. And it's not something widely talked about because, of course, it's still illegal in many places, not
Right.
necessarily the ketamine, but that's a whole nother story. It's like these are plants that have been used for centuries.
Right.
So
I
but
totally agree with you, B.
Mhm.
yeah, it's like who decided that a plant can be illegal? I'm not sure about that, but
Yeah.
that could be a whole nother topic. And I'm not saying it's for everyone, but
Mm-hmm.
it is certainly an option for people who feel like they have tried everything, right? And or people that are really just trying to go deeper into their healing journey. And for me, I have always been a bit of, I would call a seeker. And so it was like, oh, this is a way I can explore my psyche even deeper. All right, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yes,
So,
I like that.
yeah, I do too. B, what role did plant medicine play in your own healing, and what did it teach you that traditional medicine couldn't or didn't?
That's beautiful. I have been on each of the journeys that I have done, whether it's psilocybin or ayahuasca, I have been given deeper pearls of awareness. For example, on one journey I did several years ago, I was having a lot of physical pain in the journey, and I had a very trusted guide with me. And she said, this is an opportunity for a conversation. You can actually dialogue with this medicine and see, what is this pain? And it was like I was having lower back pain. It almost felt like back labor, if anybody has experienced
Oh,
that.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
mm-hmm.
yeah.
It was just relentless. And so I said, okay, I can ask these questions. I can open up this dialogue. And the information that I was presented was this is all the hardness that is really stored in your body and from generations before you. All the female lineage in your family just had this hardness to them that they couldn't even access joy. And it was, very interesting. Kind of that kidney lower back area is where we tend to store fear when we're talking about energetics. And so it became very apparent that this was another ancestral thread that my soul came here to really transmute. It was like none of the women in my family have ever been able to experience joy. And so here I am at a choice point. I have an opportunity to really transmute it. And so, of course, the journey, I was given that awareness of this that I was carrying around that I didn't even realize in my ordinary state of consciousness. It was like, yes, the back pain would creep up, and it was always chalked up to, well, you carried a heavy rucksack around for so long, right? But it was just that awareness that it is something so much deeper than that. And so each time I get some sort of awareness or something to work with like that, that just really provides a deeper layer to the healing, something to transmute and really work with and integrate.
Oh my
Wow.
gosh, that is so enlightening.
It
Wow.
is.
And I have seen too and read some articles that using like the psychedelics or the ketamine
Hmm.
has really helped a lot of PTSD survivors, and but done in a controlled, safe, supervised environment, as you're saying, not just off on your own or whatever. But yeah, and I think that really needs to be explored more because we have so many that are suffering with PTSD and aren't getting any relief or help.
Exactly.
Yes.
Isn't that called microdosing? I've been reading some articles as well where people are using it to help with these symptoms.
Yeah, even, the microdosing just implies, taking very like non-psychedelic doses, just very, very minuscule doses. I've known people that have done that with like psilocybin. They make it into very small capsules. So not enough to actually have any kind of psychedelic effect, but
Right.
the research is indicating that, the reason it's helpful is because some of these medications have been shown to increase neuroplasticity in the brain. So, sort of, we used to, that's another place where science used to, well, it wasn't caught up, right, to what we've known, our ancestors have known is that, well, the brain can't regenerate, nothing in the body can really regenerate, right? But now we're understanding that these plants and even the ketamine does help with that neuroplasticity in the brain. So that's where the magic is really happening for people who have had, even traumatic brain injuries, post traumatic stress. It's like, we can start sort of like reconnecting some of these wires in the brain. And so, yes, it's an area that we need a lot more research, but it's coming down the pipeline. I see that coming. I know there's many states, the great state of Texas included as one, recently passed some legislation to do a lot of research on another plant medicine called ibogaine, which has been really proven to help people with opioid addiction as well as those with PTSD. So, we're
Wow.
moving in that direction, and I think it is giving a lot of hope.
It's great. And as someone who's lived trauma and treats trauma, what do you think that we misunderstand the most about trauma and PTSD?
I think what we really miss the most in that traditional black and white Western mindset is the layers of trauma, truly looking at it through the lens of that ancestral thread as well. It's not just this is something that happened to me in my childhood or whatever the scenario is. It's that this comes back from lifetimes and from our ancestors. And, because my mother was raised by my grandfather, who was a POW and a horrible alcoholic, it's like, of course, that shapes how things are passed down through the lineage, right? And,
Right.
we can look at that even if you believe in past lives, ancestral thread, however you see it. It's like we come in with wounding that's not even our own. And I think if
Hmm.
we could look at that, it would open people up to a lot more compassion and a deeper understanding that it's so much deeper, right? And perhaps it's not something that we can cure, and that's okay. But
Hmm.
healing is where we really learn to integrate that and still go on to live fully, live vital, beautiful lives. And so that is something I think that really gets overlooked.
Wow. How does trauma lodge in the body?
I love that. I love that question. The Body Keeps the Score is an amazing book. If you've never read that book or listened to it on audio, it's a heavy read. It's a lot of scientific speak, but a lot of amazing points in there. And basically, what we have found through the research is the body has something called the fascial system, which is like the layer that holds all the muscles together. And for a long time, in dissection labs and things like that, they would just cut through the fascia. It's just the thing that's there, very thin, thin, thin layer. Nobody thought it was important. But now here's another place where science has caught up. It's like, oh my gosh, this is in fact important, so important that we're calling it now the body's second nervous system.
Whoa.
And because it
Oh.
encases, it creates a web across every, muscle, every fiber in the body. And so often, like for me, that the back pain that I was
Hmm.
experiencing that nobody could
Mhm.
really get a handle on, that was the trauma stored in the body, right? And so it shows up in that way. It shows up in our nervous system. If we have trauma, sometimes we get stuck in like the freeze mode, sometimes it's the fight or flight. But for a lot of women, it is that sort of functional freeze. That's where we end up stuck, where it's like, okay, I'm functioning, but I'm numb, essentially.
Mhm.
But I think really the magic is exploring that fascial system. That's why somatic practices can be so helpful for trauma. Yoga, ecstatic dance, moving the body. There's even a specialty type of massage called MFR, which is myofascial release. And so
Good.
that's really working with that fascial system to release all the places that trauma can get stuck.
That's
That's very
amazing.
fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm
It is.
learning so much today.
Yes.
Yes, I mean, the body truly does keep the score, and it's like I tell people the analogy of if you've ever seen, if you have a dog, just watch your dog after something new. I have a puppy, and I've been training her, and we took her out in public and got her into a new experience. The goal was to try to get her to stand on this cart. And she was scared, not horribly scared, but it was a new thing for her, right? But she did
Mhm.
it. She got off the cart, and the first thing she did was she shook off. That is what animals do in nature. You watch National Geographic, you see the gazelle get chased by the lion, it escapes. The first thing it does is it shakes off.
Yeah.
And it's like
Mhm.
animals have that innate sense, right? That's how they sort of release the trauma in the body. And we as humans, we forget to do our shake off, right? And so then that trauma gets lodged, it gets stuck, it gets stored in the body.
Oh, I love that analogy. That's
Mhm.
awesome.
Hmm.
Yeah. So what does real trauma healing require beyond talk therapy?
It requires, first and foremost, this is, a soapbox I've really been on lately, is step one is safety in the body. It truly is. We're understanding that on a biological level now, and understanding through my own journey, that's what was missing during, the initial stage. That's why talk therapy wasn't particularly helpful at the time, because my body didn't understand it was safe. My logical brain was like, okay, I'm here, I'm back stateside, nobody's dropping bombs on us. But my body hadn't caught up with that. I had so much of the trauma stored in the body. And so developing these little pathways of safety has to be step one if we really want to take ourselves on that healing journey. And it truly, people are like, well, okay, that sounds great. How do I start developing the safety? And
Mhm.
truly, it's something you carry with you all the time. It costs no money. It's the breath. Just learning to take long, deep breaths, sort of getting that body, even if it's for, a split second, that is enough time for the brain to start forming those pathways of safety. And so that's the first thing I do when I start working with my clients is we learn how to deep breathe, because that's something is when we're stuck in fight or flight or even
Mhm.
freeze, we're not breathing properly. The breath is very shallow. We're breathing from high up in the chest. And so learning how to take those nice, deep belly breaths.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's one thing I will say, in my journey of healing, that was the first thing that I learned that really helped me
Hmm.
was learning how to breathe and take those
Yes.
long, that deep breath. And when I do that now when I feel myself starting to kind of try to shift into that survival mode, if you will. I take a moment and just, take in that deep breath, and then, I can feel myself calming, and then I move forward.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
same here. And I
Yes.
count as I take my breath. I have a certain rhythm that I use every time, and it just immediately calms me. So,
Yes.
B, you speak about midlife awakening. Was that separate from your trauma healing, or was it intertwined?
It was intertwined for me, certainly. And for many women, astrology was a big part of and was a big part of my journey. We hadn't touched on that, but there are certain transits with the planetary alignments that happen for many women, for all women actually, at a certain time in life. Chiron return happens around age 50, and there's some other significant transits. And we often look at that time and things are shifting, right? There's a lot of questioning that time. Relationships, career, is this really it? All of these types of questions. And so it's not a crisis, right? It's an invitation. It is a call to awakening. And that's where, the magic really happens. I work with a lot of women going through these transitions as well. And it's, learning to see this as it's not a midlife crisis. I'm not sure where that terminology came from.
I'm sure it
It's
was a
true.
man.
Yeah.
Right? It's like this invitation, truly. It's an invitation to sort of course correct, if you will. And by that time, most of us have a lot to unpack, but that invitation comes on really strong in that midlife period during those specific astrological transits. So that's when most people come to me sort of seeking counsel and all of that. And it's like, okay, well, step one is safety in the body. We're going to get there first, and then sort of look at the patterning and what we need to really work with here.
Yeah. So we're really interested, and you just touched on it, your astrology work. So how did that enter your life?
Oh my goodness. That was, like I mentioned, I was just in such a dark place and really grasping at anything. And I was a big fan at the time. I had a pretty long commute for work. And so I was podcast listening all the time on the drive. And I was listening
Yep.
to one, um, gosh, I can't even think of the name of it. It was some sort of spiritual podcast, and they interviewed an astrologer. And I thought, that sounds really interesting. There's something I haven't tried yet. And so I ended up booking a reading. I felt particularly connected to this woman and hearing her story. And so I booked a session with her. And mind you, by this time in life, I had had probably over 1,000 hours of talk therapy. I'm not exaggerating. And in that 1 hour reading with her, I felt seen. I felt validated. I felt hopeful again. And I'm talking, after thousands of hours of talk therapy, I had never left a session feeling like that. And I'm like, and this
Wow.
woman, she looked at a piece of paper that had a lot of lines and symbols and, asked me for my birthday. And I don't know what the heck just happened, but I must know more. And so I dove into that head first. That woman went on to become my mentor and now a very dear friend. And it's just been a tool that I go back to over and over and over again. And I incorporate it into client work as much as, we can, because it truly is it's like a map, right? Or looking at the weather. Don't we want to know the weather before we go out? Do we need our raincoat?
Mm-hmm.
Do we need our, what do we need? And so it's a really beautiful tool, and I just absolutely love it.
That's amazing. So, for skeptics listening, what is astrology actually about beyond horoscopes?
Yes, thank you. That's a great question, because I'm sure many listeners have read a horoscope, and I
Mm-hmm.
remember reading them when I was like a teenager, and sometimes it maybe sort of made sense, but most of the time not really. And so the type of astrology that I practice, that I work with, is called evolutionary astrology. And so we're really looking at the birth chart, looking at each person as a soul on a journey. And that journey is to evolve, to become, the highest expression that one can be. And that's a journey, right? And so it's not horoscope, it's not fatalistic. It's really looking at archetypes. These are the placements in your chart. These are some challenges you may face. And again, it's one of these things that it may not be for everyone. There will be people who are skeptical. But for me, the way I sort of reframe that in my brain is like, if the moon is powerful enough to move the tides of the ocean, that's water. We're all made up of mostly water. Wouldn't we think it could be possible that the moon and the planets and the stars might have some sort of influence upon us? And again, it's very much like a typing system. There are others out there, such as human design and the Enneagram and things of that nature. But what I really love about the astrology, what sets it apart, I think, is truly looking at each person as a soul on a journey, on a soul that's here to evolve. So, with the archetypes in your chart, with whatever it is you're working with, what's the highest expression of that? And I don't do predictive astrology. I don't say, here's the day you should buy a lottery ticket. Um, some people do that sort of astrology, and there's a place for that as well. But it's really looking at sort of the questions that may come up in your life. What would be the highest way to respond to that based on your personal placements? And again, just looking at sort of the broader archetypes and your purpose on this planet.
So
Wow.
then you've seen patterns between trauma, purpose, and someone's natal chart.
1,000%. Yes. And,
Wow.
like I said, in my own, that first reading, it was like, here's a woman that's never met me. All she has is my birthday, the time I was born, and where I was
Right.
born. And she was able to, and it was scary, eerily accurate, and it was like, okay, there's something to this. And yes, we definitely can pick up on ancestral patterns and trauma patterns and different things in the birth chart. And that's why it's a really great tool, similar to like the plant medicine. Some of these things lie just beyond the subconscious, right? Or they're
Hmm.
just in the subconscious where we don't quite have access to that until someone or something mirrors it back to us. And
Right.
sometimes the astrology is just that. And it's like you have that aha moment and you're like, huh, oh, oh, that people pleasing thing. Oh, that's like a pattern. That's something I'm here to work with and integrate.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. This is so interesting to me. I had no idea. Would would you be willing to share a quick example of what astrology can reveal about purpose or healing?
Absolutely. So, when I look at astrology and from the lens of evolutionary astrology, we look at two particular points in the sky called the nodes of the moon. And the north node indicates the path forward. That's really where your soul is trying to get to. And the south node is sort of what we're trying to integrate. I don't want to say leave behind, but it's what we've already done. But something about it didn't go completely right. So there's some sort of residue of karma, what we're trying to really integrate in this lifetime. And for me personally, my north node is in the sign of Aries, which is like the warrior. And so when I sort of started to piece that together, this deep understanding came of the purpose of that warrior archetype in terms of like the spiritual warrior and the trailblazer and trying to be a thought leader and getting people to really think a lot differently. And so, the archetypes are very broad, but it really did give me a deep understanding. And it wasn't just the astrology, right? Because there was a knowing that came with that too. It was sort of, oh, like, oh, yeah, I've always sort of felt that. But to
Mm-hmm.
have this, reading where it's actually validated, like somebody else is seeing it too. And so it just sort of clicked after that. And, we can't ever look at anything in isolation like, oh, you're a Taurus. You must just like to sit on the couch and eat potato chips. I'm a Taurus. I can say that, right? So it's how everything sort of works together in your personal chart that is pointing on that soul's direction.
Wow. That is
Yeah,
just so interesting to me.
exactly. I didn't realize that much went into the astrology. So that
Oh,
I love that. That's fascinating.
I didn't
It is.
either.
Yeah, and it's just one more way that we can, become empowered, I think. It's sort of like the more you know, right? It's information and
Yeah,
what somebody chooses to do with that information. People can have a reading and choose to do nothing with it, but maybe someone hears something and it really resonates and they're like, okay. For me, I mean, it really it got me back on course in terms of my soul's direction.
yeah. So let's talk about your book, Keepers of the Light. What's the message behind it?
So, Keepers of the Light is my story through trauma and transformation back into the light. And it's more than just a memoir, it really is a tool for women who are at that pivotal point, right? That midlife crisis point. I'm doing the air quotes again. And it's it's a story of hope that, if I can overcome these things, so can you. There is nothing that special or unique about my journey. It's just a matter of having the right tools and having people in your corner supporting you that say, hey, I see you. And so the book provides so many practical tools, real ways that we can integrate that holistic healing. And it should be coming out the end of 2026.
I can't
Awesome.
wait.
Yeah, I'm definitely and it's available for pre-order right now, correct?
Yes, it is available for
Oh,
pre-order on
Okay.
publishing. So, yes.
Okay.
wow. So if someone feels lost in darkness right now, what would you want them to take from that message?
I just want people to know that there is hope. I have been in that place of absolute darkness where I couldn't see a foot in front of me. And that is the intention of the book, is that there is hope. No matter how dark, how dire the situation feels, I promise if you begin to seek and start opening your eyes, there is hope.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So B,
Yes.
we usually close before we close out, we like to do a lightning round. So are you up for a lightning round?
Yeah, I don't know if I know what that means, but yeah.
We just ask a question and you answer the first thing that comes to mind or what your favorite of the two are.
Oh, cool. I love it.
You ready?
Coffee or tea?
Tea,
Ocean or mountains?
mountains.
Ooh, a practice you never skip.
My daily breath work.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I like
Yeah.
that.
A
Mhm.
belief you've outgrown.
That we are victims of our circumstances and stories, because I know
Mm,
now that we can co-create and create our own.
I love that. So,
mhm,
one word that describes this chapter of your life.
Empowered.
mhm.
You're amazing.
We're amazing. We're all amazing.
We all
Exactly.
are amazing.
Every one of us. So, B, if someone listening feels broken physically, mentally, and spiritually, what would you want them to know about healing?
That it is a journey. It is absolutely a journey. It's not a destination that we can fly to overnight or just wake up and, oh, I'm healed. They truly call it a healing journey because it's ongoing. There's always going to be a trigger or a new scenario in life that we are dealt. So, how do we peel back the layers and just continue to build that awareness and just be curious? I encourage people to always be curious and sort of look at every situation as that, what is it here to teach me?
Bea, thank you for sharing your story with such courage and clarity today with us. Where can our listeners find out more about you and your work?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This was a beautiful conversation. I can be found on Instagram. I'm Double Libra Coaching on Instagram, and my website is Double Libra Astrology. If you find your way to the website, do sign up for the newsletter so you can stay up to date on all the offerings and things coming down the pipeline.
I will do this. I
Yeah,
am
definitely.
fascinated. And
B, your journey reminds us that healing isn't linear and that sometimes the collapse becomes the catalyst. And to
Mhm.
our listeners, if this conversation resonated, share it with someone who may be navigating their own healing path. And we will put B's information in the show notes, and it will be available on our website, traveltimestories.com. And until next time, keep traveling your story and keep making memories for life.